Hello, my name is Father Lawrence Jagfeld. I am a Franciscan friar of the Sacred Heart Province, headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, and I am the administrator of CUSA, an apostolate of persons with chronic illness and/or disability. We have reached the 21st Sunday of Ordinary Time in the B cycle of the lectionary, and we have also reached the conclusion of the 6th chapter of St. John's Gospel, which contains the beautiful discourse on the bread of life. Many of Jesus' disciples who were listening said, "This saying is hard. Who can accept it?" Since Jesus knew that his disciples were murmuring about this, he said to them, "Does this shock you? What if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? It is the Spirit that gives life, while the flesh is of no avail. The words I have spoken to you are spirit and life. And there are some of you who do not believe." Jesus knew from the beginning the ones who would not believe and the one who would betray him. And he said, "For this reason, I have told you that no one can come to me unless it is granted him by my Father." As a result of this, many of the disciples returned to their former way of life and no longer accompanied him. Jesus then said to the 12, "Do you also want to leave?" Simon Peter answered him, "Master, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and are convinced that you are the Holy One of God." Think back to the very beginning of the chapter that we are currently reading. This bread of life discourse follows the feeding of the multitude. Jesus is in a deserted place. Many people come out to see him. And the gospel actually tells us that they were 5,000 men in number, not counting women and children. Now think about today's gospel and how it ends. This chapter has whittled down the crowd to just the 12. Indeed, Jesus' assertion that he is the bread of life has drawn some to him, but it has pushed many, many others away. As we consider this particular ending to this discourse, it's important to focus our attention on St. Peter's response. You know, usually St. Peter's comments, his questions, his assertions are examples of a person who puts his foot in his mouth. But today, Simon Peter really shines. In the Synoptic Gospels, there is an account of how Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" That account is not part of St. John's Gospel. St. John works the faith of Peter into his gospel through the end of this discourse. And Peter's response at first is very simple. "Lord, to whom shall we go?" It shows that he is without guile, that he is totally innocent. And then he goes on to say, "You have the words of eternal life." This shows us that Peter's faith was in development, that he had come to regard what Jesus had to say as so important in his life that they were for him the words of eternal life. And finally, he addresses Jesus with a messianic title, "You are the Holy One of God." To be sure, this is what theologians refer to as low Christology, but it is also an assertion that Jesus is not just a prophet. Jesus is not just a holy man who comes to lead people toward God. He is the Messiah. He is the one who has come to save. And as we will see as the gospel develops, Jesus saves by giving up his life, by being ground down by those who persecute him, by being crucified, dying, and then rising to new life. Jesus maintains that his words are spirit and life. And in this we must refer, I think, to St. Paul, who tells us much about spirit and flesh. The spirit is that which leads us to God. The flesh is anything that leads us away from God. Jesus' words are spirit and life. Jesus' words are the ones that have drawn Peter and most of the disciples to him, most of the apostles. But even in this gospel, we hear a little bit about the one who will betray. Keep in mind again that St. John devotes 5 chapters to the Last Supper, but there is no institution narrative. And the betrayal of Judas, which is so explicit in the Gospels, is referred to here as a way to reference all those who are drifting away from Jesus because of his assertion that he is the bread of life. As we listen to the Gospel and as we draw an end to the discourse on the bread of life, it is with gratitude in our hearts that we have not only the example of St. Peter, who speaks his faith, but also that we still have this precious gift in our midst, the gift of the Eucharist, the source and summit of our faith. For more information about CUSA, please go to our website at www.cusan.org.